The story of the Jamison family is a tough one. It gets under your skin. It's not a clean mystery with a neat solution. It's messy and strange and deeply sad. It's a story about a family of 3 who drove into the mountains of Oklahoma and never came back out. Not alive, anyway. And at the heart of the whole confusing puzzle are 2 things that just don't make sense. A bag full of cash and a cell phone with a haunting last picture. To understand them, you have to go down a very dark road, you have to talk about witchcraft. It all started in October 2009. Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilynn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madyson lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma. They were looking to buy a piece of land, a 40-acre plot up in the Sans Bois Mountains. They wanted a fresh start, a quiet place to live, away from whatever troubles were following them. On October 8th, they loaded up their white pickup truck and drove towards that plot of land. They were never seen alive again. A few days went by, then a week. People started to worry. The family was reported missing. The search began. On October 17th, hunters found the family's truck abandoned on a remote dirt road in Latimer County. The truck was locked. Inside was the family dog, Maisie, barely alive. She was severely malnourished. It was clear the truck had been sitting there for a while. Investigators opened the truck. What they found inside didn't point to a simple case of a family getting lost. It pointed to something else entirely. They found both Bobby's and Sherilynn's wallets and driver's licenses. They found their cell phones, and they found a bank bag tucked under the driver's seat. Inside that bag was $32,000 in cash. Think about that for a second. A family disappears. Their truck is found abandoned, but their valuables are all there. The wallets, the phones, and a life-changing amount of money are just left behind. The robbery was off the table immediately. Nobody robs a family and leaves 32 grand behind. This was the first major clue that this was not a normal case. The cash was a screaming question mark. Why did they have it? And more importantly, why did they leave it? The other major clue was on Sherilynn's cell phone. Investigators looked through the photos. The last picture taken was of Madyson. The little girl was standing outside the truck. She had a strange expression on her face. Some say she looked scared, others say she looked sad or defiant. It's a grainy, unsettling photo. It doesn't look like a happy family snapshot. It looks like a moment of tension. A moment captured just before everything went wrong. The discovery of the truck, the dog, the cash, and the phone kicked off one of the largest manhunts in Oklahoma history. There are hundreds of volunteers, police, and search dogs scoured the mountains. The terrain was rough. It was dense woods, steep hills, and rocky outcrops. They searched for days, then weeks, then months. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, nothing. The Jamison family had vanished into thin air, just a few miles from their truck. For 4 long years, there was silence. The case went cold. Theories swirled. People had plenty of ideas about what could have happened. Maybe it was a murder-suicide. Bobby had been in a bad car accident years before and suffered from chronic pain. Friends and family said he could be depressed. Sherilynn had her own issues. She had bipolar disorder. Maybe the stress of it all became too much. Maybe one of them snapped. But it didn't quite fit. If it was a murder-suicide, why walk miles into the woods to do it? Why leave the dog to starve in the truck? Why leave the money? It felt wrong. Another popular theory was a drug deal gone wrong. Rural Oklahoma has its problems with methamphetamine. The family's behavior before they left had been erratic. They were losing weight rapidly. They seemed paranoid, and that $32,000 in cash looked a lot like drug money to some people. The story went that they were going to buy drugs, or maybe a meth lab on that remote piece of land. Something went sideways, they were killed, and their bodies were hidden. But this theory had the same problem as the robbery theory. The cash. Drug deals that go bad don't end with the dealers leaving the money behind. Really, they take the money. There was also no sign of a struggle at the truck, no blood, no broken glass, no bullet casings. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then there was the simplest explanation. They got lost. They went for a hike to check out the land, took a wrong turn, and succumbed to the elements. It happens. But Bobby grew up in this area. He knew the woods, and even if they did get lost, the search area was saturated. It seemed impossible that 3 bodies could be missed by so many people for so long, especially when they were so close to the truck. None of the normal explanations felt right. They left too many questions unanswered. The cash and the phone were the biggest sticking points. They were the keys. And to understand them, people started looking at the family themselves, at their beliefs, and at the strange things that were happening in their lives before they disappeared. This is where the story turns from a mystery into something that feels a lot like a horror movie. This is where the witchcraft theory begins. To understand this theory, you have to understand Sherilynn Jamison. She was a woman with deep, complicated beliefs. Her family said she was interested in witchcraft. Not in a casual Halloween costume kind of way. She took it seriously. When investigators searched the Jamisons' home, they found what some called a satanic Bible. Others argued it was a more benign book on Wiccan beliefs, a witch's Bible. The distinction matters, but the core fact remains: Sherilynn was involved in some form of spiritual practice that was outside the mainstream. This wasn't just a hobby, it seemed to consume her. Friends said she believed their house was haunted. She claimed spirits lived on their roof. She would talk about ghosts and bad omens. She wasn't just interested in these things, she was afraid of them. This fear seemed to be shared by the whole family. They had become reclusive, they were paranoid, they told their pastor they were engaged in spiritual warfare. Their pastor, Colton Norskog, gave one of the most chilling accounts of the family's state of mind. He said they came to him for help. They told him they were seeing spirits. Bobby claimed to have seen them on the roof of his house. Sherilynn said the spirits spoke to their daughter, Madyson. They claimed Madyson would talk to the spirit of a young girl who had died in the house years ago. The family was terrified. They were looking for a way to cleanse their home, to get rid of the evil they believed was tormenting them. They didn't just talk about it, they acted on it. On the side of the large storage container they owned, someone had painted a bizarre message. It was a list of strange phrases, almost like an incantation or a warning. It said things like, "Witches don't like it when their black cat is killed." It was rambling and paranoid. Sherilynn also wrote a long 11-page letter to Bobby. It was found in the abandoned truck. It wasn't a love letter, it was full of anger and resentment. She called him a hermit, accused him of not caring about his family, and wrote about death. It was the letter of a person at their wits' end, grappling with things both real and, in her mind, supernatural. So you have a family steeped in paranoia. They believe they are being attacked by evil spirits. They are desperate. They are performing rituals and seeking help. They are not in a healthy state of mind. Now, put them back in that truck, driving into the isolated Sans Bois Mountains. What happens next, according to the witchcraft theory, is not a drug deal or a simple hike. It's a confrontation. This theory suggests the Jamisons didn't go to the mountains just to look at land. They went there for a reason tied to their beliefs. Maybe they were trying to perform a cleansing ritual. A powerful one, out in nature, away from the haunted house. Or maybe they were meeting someone. A person they believe could help them with their spiritual problem. A self-proclaimed witch, or a shaman, or some other kind of spiritual healer. Or, in a darker version of the theory, they were meeting the very people they believed were cursing them. As a coven. A cult. This is where the cash comes in. $32,000 is a strange amount. It's too much for a down payment on a rural piece of land like that. But what if it wasn't for the land? What if it was a payment for a spiritual service? A desperate family, terrified for their lives and the soul of their daughter, might be willing to pay anything to make the problem go away. They empty their bank account. They gather every dollar they have. This is their one shot to buy their way out of the darkness. Under this theory, the cash wasn't for a worldly transaction, it was for a spiritual one. And that's why they left it behind. Something went horribly wrong in the mountain. Maybe the people they met were not who they seemed. Maybe they were charlatans who scared the family, causing them to flee into the woods without their money. Or maybe they were something worse. Maybe the ritual backfired. Maybe the paranoia and fear, which had been building for months, finally boiled over in that remote, lonely place. In this scenario, the family gets out of the truck. They are there to confront the evil, or to meet the people who will help them. The atmosphere is tense. They are on high alert. Every shadow, every sound in the woods confirms their worst fears. This is where the last photo of Madyson becomes so important. Look at the photo again through this lens. Sherilynn doesn't take a picture of the beautiful scenery. She doesn't take a happy picture of her daughter exploring. She takes a picture of her daughter looking troubled. Why? The witchcraft theory offers a chilling explanation. She wasn't taking a picture of Madyson, she was trying to take a picture of what was with Madyson. She believed her daughter was being tormented by spirits. In that moment of high stress and paranoia, maybe she thought she could see one of them. Maybe she thought the camera could capture what the naked eye could not. The photo wasn't a keepsake. It was an attempt to gather evidence of the evil that was hunting them. It was a desperate act by a terrified mother trying to prove that her fears were real. The look on Madyson's face isn't just a child's pout, it's the look of a child who was caught in the middle of her parents' terrifying obsession, a child who's been told over and over that there are monsters in the shadows. So, what happened after the photo was taken? The theory goes that the family's mental state, already fragile, completely shattered. They panicked. Whether they were spooked by a person, an animal, or just their own minds, they ran. They fled the truck, their safe haven. They left everything behind, the money didn't matter anymore. The phones didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was getting away from the evil they perceived was right there with them. In a state of sheer terror and possible delusion, they ran blindly into the dense, unforgiving wilderness. They didn't have a plan, they were just running. In their minds, they were running for their lives from a supernatural threat. They weren't thinking about food or water or shelter, they were just trying to escape. They probably didn't even realize how far they were going or in what direction. The worldly concerns of survival were replaced by the singular, all-consuming goal of escaping the spirits. In this state, they would have become disoriented quickly, they would have pushed themselves past the point of exhaustion, and eventually they would have collapsed, succumbing to exposure, dehydration, and starvation. This version of events explains the cash and the phone in a way no other theory does. The money was left because their problem was no longer about money. It was about survival from an unseen enemy. The phone photo was not a random snapshot, it was a record of the crisis. It explains why they were found so far from the truck and why they would abandon their vehicle and their beloved dog. Normal people don't do that, but a family in the grip of a shared psychotic delusion, a family that truly believes they are in a battle for their souls, they might. In November 2013, 4 years after they vanished, the story came to its tragic end. A group of hunters, scouting an area a few miles from where the truck was found, discovered skeletal remains. The remains were lying side by side, face down on the ground. They were identified through dental records. It was Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson Jamison. The search was finally over, but the discovery of the bodies only deepened the mystery. The medical examiner couldn't determine a cause of death. The bones were too decomposed. There were no obvious signs of trauma like bullet holes or broken bones. The report simply listed the cause of death as undetermined. The way they were found was also strange, lying together face down. Some have suggested it was a ritualistic placement. Others say it's how people naturally fall when they collapse from exhaustion. There was a small hole found in Bobby's skull, which some investigators thought could be a bullet hole, but it could not be confirmed. The final piece of the puzzle was missing. There was no clear scientific answer to how they died. Without a clear cause of death, the official investigation stalled, and in that vacuum of information, the strange theories grew stronger. The witchcraft theory, once whispered on internet forums, became one of the most prominent explanations. It's the only one that seems to account for all the bizarre pieces of the puzzle. It ties together their paranoid behavior, the witch's Bible, the pastor's story, the strange message on the container, the hate-filled letter, the abandoned cache, the haunting final photo, and the lack of a clear motive for any human attacker. It's possible, of course, that the truth is a combination of theories. Perhaps they were involved in small-time drug use, which fueled their paranoia and their obsession with the occult. Perhaps their mental health issues were the real root of the problem, and their spiritual beliefs were just the framework they used to understand their own internal struggles. A shared delusion, or folie à deux, is a recognized psychological condition where paranoia and delusions are transferred from one person to another. In this case, it might have been a folie à trois, a madness shared by the entire family. Their belief in spirits and witchcraft may not have been the cause of their deaths, but a symptom of the mental decline that led them into the mountains that day. They weren't killed by a cult or a curse, they were killed by their own minds. They walked into the woods to escape demons that existed only within their own family, and in their desperate flight from these imaginary monsters, they succumbed to the very real dangers of the wilderness. This is a profoundly sad way to look at it. It's the story of a family that fell through the cracks. A family that needed help, but instead found only fear. Little Madyson wasn't talking to the ghost of a dead girl, she was a child, echoing the strange and frightening things her parents were saying. The spirits on the roof weren't real, they were manifestations of Bobby's pain and depression. The witch's curses weren't real, they were the projections of Sherilynn's own turmoil and mental illness. The secret of the recovered cash, then, is that it was meaningless to them at the end. It was paper. It couldn't buy them peace. It couldn't protect them from the fears that consumed them. They brought it for a purpose to buy land or to pay for a ritual, it doesn't really matter which. But in their final moments, in that panicked scramble through the woods, it was just dead weight. They left it behind because they were chasing something, or running from something that had no price tag. And the secret of the phone is the secret of that final photograph. It's a window into their state of mind. It's a picture of a little girl, but it's also a picture of fear. It's a mother's attempt to capture an invisible enemy. It is perhaps the last rational thing Sherilynn did trying to document the source of her terror. After that, reason fled and they ran. We will likely never know for sure what happened to the Jamison family. The mountains are keeping their secrets. But the witchcraft theory, for all its strangeness, endures because it feels emotionally true to the evidence. It offers an explanation, however unsettling, for why a family would abandon $32,000 in cash and a perfectly good truck to go die in the woods. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about drugs, it was about belief, it was about fear. They walked into the Sans Bois Mountains looking for salvation or escape from an evil they believed was real. They didn't find it, they only found the end. The cash and the phone they left behind are not just clues in an unsolved case. They are relics of a private, terrifying war that a family fought and lost.